From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today from Iowa State University, Lee Schulz on the cattle markets. He'll look at a number of encouraging signs for improvement in cattle prices, including the latest beef export numbers. Then from the CattleTrace program, K-State's Cassie Kniebel provides an update on the implementation of this new approach to livestock disease traceability in Kansas, the system showing such good promise that other states are now joining in. Also, the new director of the Food Science Institute at K-State, Jeanette Thurston. We'll talk about her goals for that institute. And on this week's 4-H segment, K-State's Pam Van Horn and Lexie Hayes on the upcoming Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes. All that here on Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Thanks for tuning in for another Agriculture Today on the K-State Radio Network. For starters, here on a Monday, we glance to the cattle market trends and this time enlist the help of a livestock economist out of Iowa State University, Lee Schulz. He'll lend us his perspectives on the cattle trades. Lee might note at the outset here that you're just back from the national meeting of the American Association of Agricultural Economists, and you do interact with your peers from around the nation at this gathering. What was the topic of choice among the cattle economists out there?
Well, I think it was really, it was right during, as we got release of multiple cattle reports, as the cattle on feed and the cattle inventory reports, and that really helped set the stage that, we're pretty current in the market as you look short term, and as we looked at, the semi-annual cattle report, that, supplies are certainly not going to continue to grow long term. So I think that kind of sets some of the fundamentals. And then as we look much more short term, it's been talk of the feeder cattle complex, as we've really seen considerable gains early in the year, and then we really seen a swoon as corn prices increase and fed cattle prices decrease. And the real question is, what are we going to stare at for calf marketing prices come this fall? And really opinions are across the board, but I think there's considerable optimism given the supplies that we have and what we really faced here this summer.
And if we would see something break through even more positively on the trade side, so much the better then, right?
Certainly. I think demand has held strong, especially when you look at domestically. Wholesale values have been very strong. We've seen currentness really in marketing, which suggests that we're moving that supply along. And exports, for the most part, have been fairly robust. I think a little bit better than we expected. And when we look at the weekly trade data, I see quite a bit of optimism out there. When you look at outstanding sales, so this is a product that hasn't been shipped yet, we're up 42% compared to a year ago. Now, a lot can happen. Those sales can be canceled, and there's a lot of year left to go. But that shows that, the 10% increases the last couple of years we've seen year over year, I don't think are out of question this year, just given the pace that we're at. Right now, forecasts have been very much single digits, and we're likely to come in between kind of year-ago levels and what some of those forecasts likely are.
But as you look at that weekly beef trade data, the expected shipments there, who are the main customers that are lending to the more positive tone here?
Well, from our customary market standpoint, you got to point to South Korea. They're up 15% compared to a year ago. Canada's up 36%. But then you get into some of those kind of mid-tier countries that are important markets to us, but are also growing markets. Hong Kong being up 352%. And then you get down into the smaller countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Chile, those are up considerably really compared to year-ago levels. Now, also, we have seen values decrease, so we are moving more product because it's at a lower price, but we've continued to move that product, which is important when we're dealing with the supplies that we're at. The big concern out there is Japan. When you look at commitments, it's 22% lower than a year ago. Actually, accumulated exports down 7%. And a lot of that has to do with the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. So that is the deal between the European Union and Japan, the TPP that effectively we weren't part of, that gave our competitor tariff relief and has made them much more competitive in that market. And that's really why any trade negotiations we've had with Japan is moving us closer to that tariff relief and putting us on kind of a fair playing field with many of our competitors.
And so that's why the beef sector is keying in on what's happening in a preliminary sense with those trade negotiations with Japan. Well worth watching. Specific to this past week's trade, though, as you look at the fed and feeder cattle markets, Lee, just wasn't a whole lot going on to suggest any major movement one way or the other, was there?
There certainly wasn't. I don't think cash trade really pushed much of the markets. We did see about $1 higher prices in fed cattle here in Iowa and Nebraska. We've seen ranges from 114 to 116. It's pretty sideways when you look at August and October on the fed cattle complex, only about $1 difference there. Maybe some carry through from early in the week and then late last week. Feeder cattle, we've seen considerable strength there. I think that really has been driven from lower corn prices this last week and a bit of strength in the fed cattle.
You are specifically, though, you say, noting the strength in basis currently and what that's telling us. So you might share some numbers there.
Sure, and I wouldn't put it in the shocking category yet, but basis levels are really in that about $6 to $7 over the board currently, and that puts us in territory we really haven't seen in the last 10 to 15 years. Now, again, we're just dealing with the last couple of weeks here, so multiple things can change. But I think those basis levels, so just cash minus futures, being positive, really is driven by pretty current marketings, rather tight supplies especially when we look at in the north here, and really the excellent beef demand that we've seen. Slaughter levels have been similar to a year ago, so really collectively, that kind of points to a pretty strong cash market. We're seeing packers have to bid for cattle, especially when you look at packing margins. Those are rather strong compared to historical levels. We've seen even bids from packers for forward sales, here in the next 2 weeks or so at the 180 per hundredweight for dressed. And 3 to 4 weeks out, it's actually 183. So I think they're looking for cattle supplies here in the next month. And really all that's pointing to rather positive cash prices, which we could see remain much higher than the futures board. Why is that important? Well, overall, we've seen basis typically weaken as we get into August. That's a bit higher. That could mean much more to kind of producers' bottom lines here in August than what they maybe expected earlier in the year.
All right. And one more data point, if you will. The USDA put out its latest cold storage report early last week. And what indicators caught your attention there?
From a beef standpoint, I think you have to look at it certainly as a rather bullish report. So if you look at the overall four meats, beef, pork, chicken, and turkey, those were lower than a year ago, but higher than the 5-year average. But beef certainly really wasn't contributing to that. So beef at the end of June was about 12% lower than a year ago. So beef in cold storage, 8% lower than the 5-year average. We've really kind of cleaned out stocks from May to June. I think that really shows the strong demand situation that we've been facing. You compare that to pork that's really dealing with kind of record levels in cold storage. So while overall the meat complex, we're seeing rather large supplies, I think the beef sector is maybe in the best spot of we've seen really movement of those supplies out of cold storage or not even into cold storage because we've seen pretty strong demand.
Get to one more thing for the market to hang its hat on in an encouraging sense. Well, you hinted at this, Lee, just a moment ago. Might expand on it briefly here, and that is the demand for beef calves as we get into the fall, that is expected to be rather good. So you might share just how friendly that market might be.
Sure. So I think, one thing to importantly point out is feeder cattle futures are trading pretty flat as we get into fall. And you can really look at that two different ways. There's a bit of uncertainty of what prices are going to be, and the market's reflecting that in pretty flat prices, as well as there's not much seasonal decline as we get into the fall, where sometimes you do see that because of the larger supplies on the market. I think the positive factors for the feeder cattle market are certainly the forage supplies that we have available, pasture as well as the hay crop, has been overall pretty good. I think quality is a bit of a question, but we've certainly seen the quantity there. I think that could, really look at driving demand for calves, feeders, stockers, really you name it there. And then I think as you look out into spring, we're seeing some positive margins for cattle finishing, as the board's currently suggesting. So from March to June, it looks rather positive for the cattle feeding complex, and that certainly could help to strengthen calf and feeder cattle prices because they can afford to pay more, and when there's a profit there, there's opportunity for purchasing those calves, and that could certainly help escalate prices.
And in the meantime, looking ahead to this trading week, any anticipation of improved prices the next 2 or 3 days?
I certainly think we could see some carryover from the rather positive week that we just experienced to really close out most of July here. We're not looking at any major reports likely to certainly shock the market. And we're a bit in that dog days of summer. So, I think as we get throughout August, and maybe it'll be a week or two, will really give the trend of the market. I expect, quite a bit of sideways action, especially from the future standpoint here as we get throughout this week.
Well, the insight appreciated, as always. Lee, thanks for your time, and we'll talk again in a few weeks.
All right, thank you.
That's livestock economist Lee Schulz of Iowa State University, contributing his thoughts on the cattle market trends here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned into Agriculture Today, and welcome back. Well, this program will highlight on this segment of the broadcast. It's really now hitting its stride. You cattle producers are probably well acquainted with it by now, at least by name, the CattleTrace program. Joining us once again is Program Manager of CattleTrace from here at Kansas State University, Cassie Kniebel. And Cassie, this is very much a budding success story, which we want to highlight here. Remind us, though, what CattleTrace is all about in the cause of cattle disease traceability.
Thanks, Eric. It's good to be back. CattleTrace is a pilot program for animal disease traceability. It started in Kansas, although it is starting to expand outside of our borders, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But really, our ultimate goal is to develop a traceability system that works across the country. So we have 3 main objectives. The first is to develop a purpose-built infrastructure for animal disease traceability specifically. The second is to test the infrastructure and look at the capabilities and efficiencies of the system. And the third is to evaluate the economics. So look at the value of an ADT or animal disease traceability system at all production levels, from the cow-calf producer all the way to the processor, and kind of that overall industry picture.
The program itself was launched just a few months back, though, so it's really gaining steam quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's been just over a year. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. So June 30th of last year is when we announced the project, and we have made quite a bit of headway. I think it's, sometimes I look back and then I realize how much we've done. Of course, when you're in the thick of it, you're like, what are we doing? But it's going pretty well. We're really excited about the momentum. We've had a lot of expansion to other states, our bordering states, and even some in the northwestern part of the U.S. now. So Washington and Oregon, we have some folks on board. And we're shifting gears a little bit into our second objective. So we've spent the past year really recruiting participants, focusing on our guiding principles, which are developing a hands-free system. So we're using ultra-high frequency technology, and cattle can go through the system without going through individually. They're read as the cattle walk through the alleyway, up to sometimes 30 feet away. So minimal handling of the animals. Minimal data points is another one that we've kept top of mind. So we're only collecting the animal ID, the location, the GPS location of the readers, and then the time and the date stamp. And really data privacy. We know data privacy is top of mind for beef producers, for folks in agriculture. So we set up CattleTrace as a nonprofit 501c3 organization last August. And we have a board of directors. They're really making the decisions on how the data is accessed. So we've spent the past year on that and kind of setting the infrastructure, installing readers, getting tags in ears, and we're over 50,000 reads in the database now. We've started data collection this past fall of 2018, and we'll continue through the middle of next year, so through summer of 2020. And so now we're shifting gears to that second objective.
Before we talk about that second objective, though, participation has been key, obviously, to making this work. So the scope of that participation has been at least 2 expectations, if not more.
Yes. No, we've kind of exceeded actually all of our kind of benchmark goals. So we have 10 livestock markets that have readers. 8 of those are in Kansas, 1 is in Oklahoma, and 1 is in Missouri. Okay. And we're actually going to, and 1 is in Kentucky, actually. So we have 11 now. 1 was just installed last week. And then we'll have another one installed in Oklahoma here in the next few months. So we are expanding that footprint. Feed yards is the next level. So we have, 2 backgrounders and 13 feed yards on board, and they have readers. One of those backgrounders is actually in Nebraska, and they send some of their cattle to a feed yard in Kansas. So you kind of have multiple reads on those cattle. And then we have the 3 major packers in Kansas. And, of course, numerous cow-calf producers across Kansas and into Missouri. Wouldn't be where we are without those partners. And they are partners, participants' partners, and very grateful for the support we've had and hopefully will continue to have throughout the rest of the program, the project.
It's great buy-in. But like you say, the next step is testing the system and seeing if it's accomplishing the intended goals. So how will that be carried out, Cassie?
We have spent a lot of time on developing the process and methodology for testing the infrastructure. One of the most, if not the most important part of the project overall, especially if we're talking about results of the program, of course you have to have the infrastructure and the data to go into the system, but if you don't test it, you don't know if it works. So that's really where we're shifting our focus over these next few months. We have kind of a process in place we have some benchmarks. So we'll test with the data set we have. We are also going to do kind of a simulated data set to figure out, okay, what holes do we have? If you have X percentage of the industry, what does that look like? And just kind of show some different tests to really evaluate the system. And we are spending a lot of time on that database development piece. So we will have more information to share on those details this fall and kind of an official report.
But you want to go about that evaluation of the system deliberately so you get a true feel for how it'll perform when it's unleashed for the long haul, if you will.
Right. Yes. We have that end goal in mind. And so that goal is to, again, develop a system that works across the country. And so as we think about that, we've really included those details into our process to evaluate the system, as well as kind of answer people's questions that we've heard kind of throughout this past year.
So it's really off and rolling, and you still are encouraging more producers to take part in CattleTrace. And how does one express that particular interest?
Yeah, so we kind of have our second round of producer meetings coming up. We want to get in front of folks before weaning time, so we'll have another round starting in August. We'll be at the KLA Field Days. I think there's 3 in August, and we'll have 6 or so others across Kansas and Missouri and Oklahoma. You can see those dates on our website at cattletrace.org or on our Facebook page as those kind of get scheduled. As well as we're really excited, we're planning an annual meeting. The CattleTrace Industry Symposium is what we're calling it. It's on November 22nd. Those details will also be posted here by mid-August on our website, cattletrace.org.
So that's a great resource to find out everything you want to know about this program, cattletrace.org. You have obviously, Cassie, interacted with participants the last several months as they've come on board. How do you gauge the level of satisfaction and comfortability with the system, albeit in the early going?
Mm-hmm. I guess you could always do the old adage, no news is good news. We have had great interactions with people, whether they have questions about CattleTrace, challenge some of what we're doing. I think that's the only way we can get better. But overall, we've had really good, positive feedback from producers who have participated in the program, whether it's the cow-calf guy or all the way through to the packer. We are working closely with each kind of sector, especially the packers. We've had cattle start hitting those packers over the past few months, and so we're kind of fine-tuning the readers at the packer level right now. We are tracking read rates, so that's something that people are very interested in, especially with this newer technology. So right now we're at 94% for livestock markets and around 98% for feed yards. And again, we're kind of working through those details with the packers to figure out where we're going to land as more of an average read rate. It keeps improving, which is good, but there's a wider range there right now.
Very good. And it's a good testimony that these other states have taken notice of what you've done in a comparatively short period of time, and in that this may well end up being a template for a large part of the cattle sector nationwide in as far as traceability.
Yes, again, you hit the nail on the head. That's kind of our goal, is to build a template or a system that can work across the country. And the only way we can do that is with our partners, with feedback from the industry. And that's really kind of that turning point, I guess, and why we're going to have that meeting in November, is it'll be an opportunity for producers, whether you're participating in CattleTrace or not. It's an open meeting. You'll have to register, but it's free. And we hope that we have great attendance, because it'll be an opportunity to provide feedback on whether you think CattleTrace works or if something needs to be changed for a U.S. traceability system.
Well, it's a while away, but get it on the calendar. November the 22nd, the CattleTrace Symposium taking place right here on the Kansas State University campus, as a matter of fact. You can find out all the details about that. You can also look into the pathway for being a participant in this program, all at cattletrace.org. And hats off to you and your team for such tremendous progress in this effort in just a little over a year now. So, Cassie, keep up the good work, and we appreciate the update.
Thank you.
She's the program manager of CattleTrace. And once again, K-State, the Kansas Livestock Association, and Kansas Department of Agriculture partnering to bring this system together to allow a more effective means of animal disease traceability in protection of the beef cattle sector. We'll be hearing more about it as we move forward, of course. You're listening to Agriculture Today on the K-State Radio Network.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Agriculture Today continues now. Eric Atkinson with you. The Food Science Institute here at Kansas State University is under new management, if you will. For the new director of that institute has been named, and she is now on board here on the K-State campus. And it's our first opportunity to talk with Jeanette Thurston about the institute and its mission here at K-State in serving the agricultural industry. Jeanette, welcome to K-State, first of all.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's great to be here. It's great to be in Kansas.
A bit about your background, and it is an impressive one in the area of food science and food safety. Talk about how you got into this field.
Sure. So after graduating from the University of Arizona with my PhD, my first job out of grad school was to join USDA ARS, Agriculture Research Service, which is the intramural research branch of the USDA. I was there. I set up a environmental microbiology laboratory focused on public health and water quality, really looking at that pre-harvest environment. And I was there doing work alongside colleagues at University of Nebraska in Lincoln for about 8 years. And after about 8 years, I decided I wanted a career change and do something a little bit new, a little bit more exciting. So I took my family and we headed off to Washington, D.C. And there I became a national program leader for food safety at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, which is also a USDA agency. And so I was a national program leader for food safety for about 5 years. And then once again, I was ready for something a little bit different. And so then I applied for science officer position there at NIFA, and I worked alongside NIFA leadership in developing budgets and overseeing programs and helping develop programs for the entire science portfolio of NIFA. So it was a fantastic experience. And, once again, I had an itch and I heard about this great job here at Kansas State University. And I actually know quite a few folks over here because of my time at Nebraska, but of course also because of my time at NIFA. And so I, put my hat in the ring, and I am so incredibly honored to be here and now serving as the director for the Food Science Institute.
Well, with that background, it's great to have you here in this capacity. Talk about the institute itself and what's ahead for it. It's been in place for about 18 years now here at the campus. Yeah. And remind us of its mission and purpose, if you would.
Sure. So the Food Science Institute really is to provide leadership and advance world-class education, extension, and research programs and food system solutions to industries, communities, and individuals. And so what's really fantastic about being here is I get to work with these nationally and internationally recognized scientists, staff members who are helping deliver that science to the people of Kansas as well as throughout the nation. So I'm really excited to be here.
When we look at the Institute and its structure, if you will, it tries to encompass quite a cross-section of scientists in various disciplines. That lends to its uniqueness, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interdisciplinary group of scientists from not only the College of Agriculture, but across the university. So if I remember correctly, it's about 5 colleges and 11 departments across KSU where we have experts really addressing interdisciplinary challenges.
So, as you take over as the director of the Institute, what, Jeanette, are your general aspirations for it? What are the objectives immediately at hand?
Sure. So my first 6 months, I'm going to really be focused on getting to know folks. I spent my first 2 weeks getting to know the core faculty of the Food Science Institute, those folks in animal science. I spent a lot of time learning about their programs, learning out the courses that they teach, learning about their priorities and their needs in order to be successful. So I'm going to continue to do that, meeting with folks all across Kansas State University that have a part in the Food Science Institute and the work that we do. And another priority, which is a priority, I think, for most folks around campus, is to expand undergraduate and graduate enrollment, thinking about pulling our group together, thinking about strategies, how we might go about that. I think a lot of folks, I have a 13-year-old myself, and my 13-year-old boy, that's the time to get them excited about science. Mm-hmm. And for them to understand what food science is. Food science, really is incredibly broad. It covers so many disciplines, from the biological to the physical to the chemical sciences, microbiology, engineering, testing, marketing even. I mean, it spans so many things. And I think a lot of people don't know what food science is. So we need to get the message out and how fun, how many incredible opportunities that there are for folks who get a food science degree. In fact, I don't know if you know this, Eric, but almost 100% of our students have jobs upon graduation. So it's a really fantastic area. There are so many opportunities for these students. We just need to get the word out. We don't want to be the best kept secret.
Right. In as far as research, Jeanette, do you sense that the Institute will be tackling specific areas of emphasis in the relative near term?
Well, I know those are conversations that we're going to have. One of the things that I feel is my job is to really facilitate discussions on a shared vision that includes a shared science vision. So there are a lot of new, incredible opportunities, things that maybe we're not tackling right now, but we could be alongside some of our colleagues. Just for example, our colleagues over in engineering, computer science specifically, data science. We've all heard about data science and data analytics or predictive analytics. These are areas that absolutely can be applied in the food industry. So, just for an example, we can actually be able to identify or track the origin of an outbreak. So a microorganism, we can actually be able to identify or track back to where the origin of that microorganism came from through data science and predictive analytics. So there's a lot of course, marketing is an obvious one. But that's one possible area that we may be getting into in the future. But these are all discussions that the team is going to have here in the near future.
And the spectrum is wide, though, as you say, when you look at food science in its entirety. So lots of opportunities here. Looking forward to talking with you as time goes along, and it's a pleasure to have you here, Jeanette. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
She's the newly appointed director of the Food Science Institute at Kansas State University, Jeanette Thurston. Now, this week's edition of Tree Tales with K-State forester Charlie Barden. Charlie?
Did you know that trees played an important part in Kansas history? As early settlers crossed the Kansas prairie, they usually headed for cottonwood trees to make camp. The tall trees were important landmarks which could be seen for many miles over the grassy landscape. They also knew that a grove of cottonwoods usually indicated that water was present too, and the shade was welcome shelter from the hot prairie sun, while the fallen leaves were used for firewood. The cottonwood is the official Kansas state tree. Many of the larger rivers in Kansas, like the Delaware, Kansas, Smoky Hill, Republican, and Saline rivers, had extensive groves of timber growing on their banks. But much of these bottomland forests were cut for construction timbers or cleared for agricultural crops. This has led to unstable stream banks in many areas and resulted in muddy water and increased siltation to our reservoirs. Replacing these streamside trees, now called riparian buffers, is an important conservation practice promoted by state agencies and the USDA. You've been listening to Tree Tales. I'm Charles Barden, a forester with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Charlie. And this is Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. The 2019 Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes is being held August 24th and 25th on the Kansas State University campus. Here to provide an overview is Kansas 4-H specialist Pam Van Horn and 4-H Youth Livestock Coordinator Lexie Hayes. Pam says the time is running out for 4-H youth interested in registering for this year's event.
That is correct. They are due August 1. So that all the 4-Hers across the state can get involved and be ready for the Livestock Sweepstakes that happens in August.
And this is something that is well attended. You're going to get a lot of teams participating in this competition. Lexie?
Yep. Every year we have about 300 kids that are on campus participating in one or more of the events. The Livestock Sweepstakes contest encompasses the state 4-H livestock judging contest, the meat judging contest, the Skillathon, and the Quiz Bowl. So there are lots of opportunities for them to see maybe what their unique talents are. Some of them come and do the meats judging contest because they're doing all the others, but find that skill-a-thon and expressing their knowledge they know about the production side is their talent, where others are really strong livestock judges, but they also stay and compete just so they can learn more about skill-a-thon and maybe identifying equipment, identifying feeds, work on those things, and then each year they'll get better and expand their knowledge across the whole base when it comes to the livestock industry.
And they have the opportunity to participate on several different teams for this competition?
Correct. They can participate in just one contest or multiple contests. It's entirely up to them and their county what they want to be involved in.
Pam, some of the educational opportunities that exist from this sweepstakes.
Oh, it's a wonderful opportunity just to learn about the industry of the livestock, whether that's beef, sheep, swine, or meat goats. This incorporates all of those livestock species, and the questions that are asked at Quiz Bowl can be, where is the breed registration headquarters of some sheep organization? So it just broadens that perspective that a young person can learn about the livestock industry. Because as Lexie was saying, it's not only do they identify equipment, but they need to be able to identify different breeds of livestock. And, it's not just the regular ones that we used to have that we think about, Angus Herefords and Shorthorns and Charolais. There are some new breeds that encompasses that. So it just opens the opportunities to try different skills and talents.
Do they have to answer in the form of a question? This sounds a little bit like Jeopardy.
In Quiz Bowl, no, they just have to answer as they would.
So how do they study for this then? Because as you were saying, there's a lot of different areas they need to know about.
There are resources that are provided for them to update themselves with and become familiar with. And then sometimes, if they really in-depth, there may be a question out of the blue that it just takes a good person that has studied and looked at a broad range of resources. Sometimes it's just learning at home. What equipment are you using and what is its use? Others, there's challenges on identifying grains that are fed. It's there. Sometimes we forget what does corn look like and, the other parts of what's put into a ration. It may be added. So we need to be more aware of what we're doing with our livestock. And this contest really identifies if you're paying attention. If you're paying attention at home, because you'll go, oh, there's this piece of equipment. And you go, oh, I've seen it before. I'm not sure what it is, but I've seen it before. So I think it's an eye-opener that everything that we do has a purpose.
What about in terms of the livestock judging then? How is that set up and how does that work and how do you test their knowledge?
There are a variety of classes that cover beef, sheep, and hogs and goats that they judge. So it's the standard 4 animals in a class and base them on the best animal in that class to the weakest animal in that class. And usually there is a combination of just judging market classes to breeding classes. Some of them will have performance data that go along with that. So some of them it's starting out, with the basics of what makes the ideal animal and then expands to those kids that are actually starting their own herds and making genetic decisions at home at using that performance data and selecting the right breeding animal for their operation. In some instances, there is a scenario they have to follow and make their decisions based on that because what works for you doesn't always work for your neighbor. And so it's learning those skills as well and applying it to a livestock judging setting.
Is this one of those where they also get judges' feedback?
Yes, absolutely. Especially for the judging contest, both the meats and livestock at the end of the day, the livestock judging teams and the coaches, so that would be Chris Mullinex and Travis O'Quinn, will go through the contest with the team. So it's a great learning opportunity as well. And then obviously in the Quiz Bowl, you'll find out what the answer is when you answer aloud from the moderator.
And in the skill-a-thon, when the contest is over, then the adults can go in and review it, and the answers are given. So it is a good time to experiment in learning, and then also you will get the correct placings afterwards so to see how close you came in identifying what was there.
There's a pretty wide range of ages that can participate in this, so that probably makes it a little bit unique in and of itself.
That's correct. There's a wide range. It's a state contest, so it is open for kids that are 9 to 18 years old. And so, but it is our state contest. So from this, we are choosing kids that are going to represent us at the national level. So it's pretty high level, and we go to the level of our kids, and we have some fantastic kids that are going to be great leaders for our industry. And so, but it's great to start out younger kids, as long as it's not overwhelming for them. And a lot of times I tell them, if you are doing things at home, you're paying attention at home, when you're feeding your calf, you're reading the label of the feed that you're feeding them, then you're going to be okay, and you can think your way through a lot of the decisions that you need to make at the state contest.
The registration is online, and they need to complete that really before the end of the week.
That is correct. And it actually has to be done through the Extension office, just because ultimately they can put together a team and then have some individuals. And so counties and Extension units make those decisions. So if they haven't let their Extension agent know that they're interested in coming, they need to do that so their agent can get them registered.
Another thing we should point out is this is going to be a busy weekend on the K-State campus, so they might want to start making some of those arrangements too.
That is true. It is move-in weekend at Kansas State, and this has kind of been the tradition that it's held on that same day. So hotels fill up quickly, along with there's a lot of traffic. So probably leave early and be prepared that parking might be difficult.
That's Kansas 4-H specialist Pam Van Horn and 4-H Youth Livestock Coordinator Lexie Hayes. Again, 4-H Youth need to contact their local county or district extension office by this Thursday to register for the 2019 Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes. It's being held August 24th and 25th on the K-State campus. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.